Ambassador Catherine Reynolds adjusted her silk collar for the 100th time, a seemingly nervous gesture that allowed her to activate the quantum recorder embedded in her ceremonial brooch. The Galactic Kingdom's crystal palace stretched above her, its ever-shifting geometric patterns designed to remind visitors of their host's architectural superiority. Kate allowed herself a small smile. Let them think her awestruck. Ambassador Reynolds. A melodious voice chimed from behind. How delightfully primitive your attire is. Prince Vithran's towering form cast an iridescent shadow across her face, his fourth arm holding a crystalline goblet of what passed for wine in this sector. His scales shifted from azure to emerald, a sign of assumed dominance in kingdom body language. Your Highness. Kate executed a bow precisely 5 degrees too shallow for his status, a calculated mistake. The kingdom's hospitality continues to overwhelm our humble human sensibilities. The slight emphasis on humble made several nearby nobles titter, their jewelry chiming in harmonized derision. The centennial gathering sprawled around them, a showcase of the kingdom's wealth and power. Anti-gravity platforms carried delicacies from 1,000 worlds, while holographic dancers performed impossible feats between the tables. Representatives from dozens of species mingled beneath the crystal dome. Though humans were notably rare, Kate was the first to be invited to such a prestigious event. Tell me, Ambassador, Vithran's secondary mouth curved in what passed for a smile, how does your species cope with being so limited? No natural psychic abilities, no biological quantum computing, not even basic genetic engineering. It must be terribly frustrating. Kate laughed, the sound carrying just far enough to draw attention. Oh, Your Highness, we manage. Though I must admit, having only 2 arms does make it difficult to properly appreciate your famous centennial toast. She gestured to the multiple glasses required for the traditional ceremony. Thran's scales rippled with amusement. Perhaps we should simplify it for you. Here. He extended his third arm, offering a single ornate goblet filled with shimmering liquid. A special vintage, reserved for developing species. The surrounding nobles fell silent, their attention razor-sharp. Kate recognized the implied insult and the opportunity it presented. She took the goblet with deliberate grace, noting how Vithran's scales shifted to deep purple with anticipated triumph. Your thoughtfulness honors humanity, she said, raising the glass. The quantum recorder in her brooch silently catalogued every chemical component of the drink, every subtle shift in the prince's bioluminescence, every caught breath from the watching crowd. Her apparent naivety had drawn exactly the audience she needed. The liquid touched her lips just as her neural implants confirmed its contents. Neurotoxin, derived from the rare callus flower, modified to be particularly effective against human physiology. How predictable. Kate took a full sip, watching Vithran's eyes widen with genuine surprise at her boldness. She even managed 3 steps toward the central platform, where she had been scheduled to give a speech about human kingdom cooperation, before allowing the poison to take effect. Her collapse was spectacular, theatrical, even. She made sure to fall toward a cluster of neutral species ambassadors, her last words a perfectly timed whisper. But we trusted. As consciousness faded, Kate caught Vithran's smug expression and the horrified gasps of the witnesses. Her neural implants transmitted their final data burst to the quantum relay hidden in her ceremonial sash. The message would reach Earth in minutes, carrying proof of the kingdom's treachery. The last thing she saw was Vithran raising a toast to her fallen form, his scales now of victorious gold. He had no way of knowing that his perfect crime had just triggered a response decades in the making. No way to understand that he hadn't killed a diplomat. He had martyred the perfect catalyst for humanity's carefully planned revelation. Kate's final thought, as the darkness took her, was simple. Asterisk right on schedule asterisk. The kingdom's emergency response center erupted into chaos as every monitoring screen simultaneously flashed red. Admiral Javeri's primary heart skipped a beat as thousands of ship signatures simply vanished from the quantum tracking grid. Report, he barked, all four arms gripping his command podium. "Sir, we're losing contact with every human vessel in Kingdom space." A junior analyst's scales flickered with panic. "They're not destroyed. They're just going dark." On the massive holographic display dominating the chamber's center, green dots representing human ships winked out one by one. Trade vessels, mining operations, diplomatic shuttles, all powering down in perfect synchronization. The effect rippled across star systems like a wave of deliberate silence. "Impossible," Jigari muttered. "No species has the coordination to." The Admiral's words died as every screen in the command center suddenly shifted to display the same message, repeated in each of the Kingdom's official languages. "You kill the wrong species, Diplomat." The message pulsed with a slow, heartbeat-like rhythm. No signature, no demands, just those 6 words, burning across every display in the Kingdom's emergency network. "Sir," another analyst's scales had gone pale gray with fear. "The human colonies, they're shutting down. Every human settlement in our space is going dark. Power signatures dropping to 0. Jiveri's secondary hearts began racing. The humans had appeared so disorganized, their colonies scattered and inefficient. How were they coordinating this? "Get me Prince Vithran," he ordered. "Unable, sir. All quantum comm links to the noble estates are experiencing interference." The Admiral's scales rippled with unease. The timing was too perfect. What about the trade routes? A senior analyst brought up the trading network display. Where there should have been thousands of cargo vessels moving between systems, there was only emptiness. The humans hadn't just stopped their ships. They'd somehow halted every automated trading drone and cargo hauler they'd sold to other species. "Sir, the Merchants Exchange is in freefall. 30% of our automated trade infrastructure just went offline. The humans, they built more of our trading network than we realized." Jiveri was about to respond when the gravitational sensors began screaming. Massive distortions were appearing near every major jump gate in Kingdom space. Distortions that shouldn't be possible with known technology. "Probably sensor ghosts," he said, trying to convince himself. "The humans don't have the capability to." The lights flickered. Just once. Just enough to remind everyone present that humans had helped upgrade the Kingdom's power grid over the last decade. "Admiral," a whisper from the back of the room. "I've been analyzing the trade routes of human vessels over the past 10 years. Look at this pattern." The display shifted to show a decade of human ship movements. What had seemed like inefficient, almost random paths between systems suddenly resolved into something else. A massive, deliberate web, with each human vessel following precise courses that, when layered over time, created. "That's a military deployment pattern," Jiveri breathed. They'd been positioning themselves for years. The silence in the command center was broken by a new message spreading across their screens. "Diplomatic immunity is not a STGGistion." As if to punctuate the warning, reports began flooding in from across Kingdom space. Noble houses were discovering their private security networks compromised. Military vessels were reporting mysterious power fluctuations, and in the heart of it all, Prince Vithran's private communication channels had gone completely dark. The humans hadn't just prepared for retaliation. They'd spent years weaving themselves into the very fabric of Kingdom society, hiding their true capabilities behind a mask of technological inferiority. And now, with surgical precision, they were demonstrating just how vulnerable the Kingdom had become. "Sir," the junior analyst's voice quivered. "What do we do?" Admiral Jiveri stared at the pulsing message, his scales now ashen with the realization of what they'd awakened. "We wait," he said quietly, "and we pray to the ancestors that this is the worst they do." The silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm that had been brewing for far longer than anyone in the Kingdom had suspected. Prince Vithran's talons clicked nervously against his command throne as he watched his prized stellar hammer-class yacht explode in the private hangar. The security feeds showed no intruders, no weapons fire. The ship had simply torn itself apart from the inside out. "Prepare my backup vessel," he ordered, scales shifting between anxiety purple and rage red. "My prince," his chief of security's voice trembled. "Your secondary yacht. It just suffered the same fate." "And the tertiary vessel?" A distant explosion answered that question. Vithran's inner eyelids flickered rapidly as he processed the implications. No alarms had been triggered. No emergency protocols activated. His ships had simply decided to destroy themselves. "Lock down all my accounts," he snarled. "Transfer everything to the secure." Unable to comply, Your Highness. His financial advisor's scales had gone death-white. "All your credentials have been altered. The systems don't recognize us anymore. And there's something else." The advisor's voice cracked. "The accounts are empty." Across kingdom space, similar scenes played out in noble houses and military installations. Security systems turned against their masters. Doors sealed or opened at random. Environmental controls developed glitches that, while not lethal, made their victims deeply uncomfortable. In the kingdom's strategic command center, Admiral Juveri stared at the latest analysis with mounting horror. "Show me the human trade routes again. Overlay them with our defense grid coordinates." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a decade of human shipping traffic. Each route, each regular stop, each navigational error that had required brief maintenance delays. They all corresponded perfectly with critical nodes in the kingdom's defensive network. "Those primitive cargo ships," Juveri whispered. "They were mapping everything. Every weakness. Every blind spot." His scales rippled with bitter appreciation. "And we gave them maintenance access ourselves." A junior analyst rushed in, their ceremonial rank markings askew. "Admiral, the quantum cores, they're not responding." The kingdom's pride, their mighty battle cruisers, sat dead in their docks. The quantum cores that powered them, cores that humans had helped maintain during trade negotiations, refused to initialize. No amount of override codes or emergency protocols could wake them. On 1,000 worlds, the kingdom's nobles were learning hard lessons about human ingenuity. Private bunkers sealed themselves. Escape ships reported mysterious malfunctions. Security forces found their weapons locked in safety mode. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're detecting unusual patterns in routine human trade transmissions from the past decade. When decoded differently, they contain instructions, military protocols, infiltration plans. They've been hiding their battle plans in plain sight, disguised as cargo manifests and maintenance requests." Vithran, now confined to his chambers by his own security systems, watched helplessly as his private entertainment display activated itself. Instead of the usual noble entertainments, it showed footage from his own security cameras. Footage of him poisoning Ambassador Reynolds. The footage was being broadcast across every noble house's private channels. "My prince," his last loyal guard called through the sealed door. "There's something else. The human ships that visited our ports over the years, their crews weren't always the same species." The revelation hit like a quantum torpedo. The humans hadn't just been gathering intelligence. They'd been inserting agents modified to pass as different species. Every maintenance worker, every trade delegate, every entertainment performer could have been. A new message appeared on screens across kingdom space. "Would you like to know how many of your servants are actually human?" In the Strategic Command Center, Admiral Juveri received the latest intelligence summary. The humans hadn't bothered hiding their movements anymore. Massive warships were emerging from what should have been empty space, taking up perfect attack positions identified by years of patient observation. "Sir," an analyst's voice shook. "About those gravitational anomalies we detected earlier. They weren't sensor ghosts." Juveri's scales went completely black, the color of absolute dread. The humans hadn't just prepared for this moment. They'd spent years ensuring that when it came, the kingdom would be helpless to resist. And this, he realized with growing terror, was only the beginning. The massive holographic display in Kingdom Strategic Command dissolved into static as Admiral Chivalry watched the impossible unfold. Where there had been empty space moments before, human warships now hung like obsidian daggers against the stars. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. How? His scales shifted through every shade of disbelief. Their largest shipyards couldn't build vessels this size. Sir, his senior analyst's voice cracked. They didn't. According to these readings, some of these ships are decades old. They'd been hiding them somehow, using technology we've never seen. The vessels were beautiful in their brutality. Angular shapes that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. No wasted space, no decorative flourishes like kingdom ships. These were weapons, pure and simple, and they had appeared simultaneously at every strategic location the humans had mapped over the years. Tactical analysis, Chivalry demanded, fighting to keep his secondary heart steady. The ships are, sir, they're positioned exactly where our defense grid is weakest. Every blind spot, every sensor shadow, every maintenance gap we've had in the past decade, they know them all. A new voice cut through the command center, human, female, and coldly professional. Admiral Chivalry. I believe it's time we had a chat about the true state of our technological capabilities. Every screen shifted to show a human woman in a crisp military uniform. Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force looked nothing like the primitive humans they'd dismissed for so long. You see, she continued, those trade ships you so graciously allowed into your space, each one carried detailed sensor packages. Every time you gave us maintenance access to your defense grid, we weren't just fixing it. We were learning how to bypass it. Chivalry's scales went ash-gray as tactical displays showed more human ships decloaking. Their formation wasn't random. They had positioned themselves in a complex three-dimensional web that could strike every major noble house's homeworld simultaneously. Impossible, he whispered. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors? Chen's smile was razor-sharp. We helped design your latest sensor upgrades, just like we helped upgrade your quantum cores, your defense networks, your communication systems. Tell me, Admiral, did it never strike you as odd how eager we were to accept such unfavorable trade terms in exchange for primitive technical assistance? Around him, the command staff watched in horror as system after system revealed hidden weaknesses. The humans hadn't just mapped their defenses, they'd helped build them, introducing subtle flaws that only they could exploit. Behind every trade deal, Chen continued, every diplomatic concession, every seemingly inferior human technology we shared, there was a purpose. You thought you were exploiting us. In reality, we were positioning pieces on a board you couldn't even see. A junior officer burst in, scales practically translucent with panic. Sir, the noble houses, their private security forces, they're reporting that some of their most trusted advisors are. They're human. Chen finished. Amazing what genetic modification and some good acting can accomplish. Your species' arrogance made it almost too easy to infiltrate. After all, who would suspect that primitive humans could alter their very biology to pass as different species? Chivalry watched as reports flooded in from across kingdom space. The humans hadn't just positioned their fleet perfectly. They'd inserted sleeper agents at every level of kingdom society. Years of careful preparation, all leading to this moment. We're transmitting proof of Prince Vithran's crimes to every noble house, Chen said, along with evidence of various other indiscretions we've gathered over the years. I suspect the kingdom's political landscape is about to become interesting. The admiral stared at the human fleet, finally understanding. They hadn't just prepared for war. They'd made sure that when it came, victory was already assured. Your move, Admiral. Chen's image smiled. Though I should warn you, we've been playing this game for far longer than you realized, and we're several thousand moves ahead. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of kingdom officers wondering just how badly they'd underestimated humanity's capacity for patient, methodical vengeance. Prince Vithran paced his sealed chambers, watching his own security feeds betray him. Every few minutes, another noble house's private channel would light up with evidence of their darkest secrets, all collected meticulously by those they'd dismissed as primitive. "My prince," his last loyal advisor's voice crackled through a failing comm system. "House Ktheri has. They've publicly blamed us for bringing this catastrophe upon the kingdom. They're mobilizing their fleet." Vithran's scales flickered between fear white and rage crimson. "Impossible. House Ktheri has been our closest ally for generations." "Had been, Your Highness. The humans just released proof that your father's assassination 3 cycles ago. It wasn't rebels. It was Ktheri assassins." The prince froze. He'd always suspected, but could never prove. "How did they know?" he whispered. "How could they possibly?" His answer came as his primary display screen activated without command. Security footage played. A servant, one who'd worked in his household for years, subtly shifting their features. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Human infiltration technology at work. Across kingdom space, similar revelations sparked chaos. Noble houses that had stood united for centuries turned on each other as carefully hidden evidence of betrayals, assassinations, and conspiracies surfaced simultaneously. The humans hadn't just gathered intelligence. They'd waited until they had enough to shatter the kingdom's political foundation completely. In the Strategic Command Center, Admiral Javeri watched his civilization tear itself apart. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported, scales almost transparent with stress, "we've confirmed that at least 15% of all high-level servants across the noble houses were human agents. But we can't identify them all. Their genetic modifications are too perfect. The noble houses are demanding military support," another officer added, "each claiming the others are human collaborators. We can't verify any commands we're receiving. The humans compromised our authentication protocols years ago." Javeri's secondary hearts nearly stopped as he realized the humans' true strategy. They didn't need to fire a single shot. The mere possibility of infiltration was enough to paralyze the kingdom's rigid command structure. A new message flashed across their screens. "Every secret UEVER Wolgehals advocate to AAs. He erwähnt. We did." The kingdom's feared secret police, the Obsidian Guard, discovered their own classified databases had been compromised for years. Every blackmail file, every hidden camera recording, every dirty secret they'd collected, all of it was now being systematically released to exactly the wrong people. "They're not just exposing secrets," Javeri realized aloud. "They're selective about it. Each revelation is calculated to cause maximum damage to our political structure." House turned against house. Security forces couldn't trust their commanders. Commanders couldn't trust their subordinates. The kingdom's hierarchical society, built on centuries of tradition and rigid protocol, was paralyzed by the sudden, terrible question: who is actually one of us? In his chambers, Vithran watched helplessly as his house's private security forces fought each other in the corridors. Some claimed to be loyal, others claimed their opponents were human agents, and none could prove their identity to anyone's satisfaction. "Your Highness," his advisor's voice came again, now shaking. "We've lost contact with our house's fleet. The crew, they're refusing orders. They say they can't verify if you're actually you." The prince's scales went death black as he finally understood. The humans hadn't just infiltrated their society. They'd weaponized the kingdom's own paranoia and rigid social structure against itself. Every attempt to restore order only bred more suspicion. A final message appeared on his screen. "Would you like it to know which of your remaining loyal servants is actually ally MVSADR rewind all DS spears?" In the command center, Ji watched the kingdom's mighty houses collapse into chaos, each accusation and revelation carefully calculated to cause maximum damage. The humans didn't need their massive fleet to win this war. They'd already won it years ago, with patience, perfect infiltration, and the understanding that the kingdom's greatest weakness was its own arrogance. The House of Cards was falling, and every attempt to stop it only accelerated the collapse. The kingdom's High Council chamber, normally a model of decorum and rigid hierarchy, had devolved into chaos. Noble houses that had maintained peace for centuries now sat divided, their representatives casting suspicious glances at every servant, every guard, every fellow council member. High Chancellor HFY, his scales cycling through stress patterns, activated the central holographic display. Perhaps if we examine the human trade agreements again, we can understand how they deceived us. A new voice echoed through the chamber. Admiral Sarah Chen's hologram materialized in the center of the room, replacing the display. Let me save you some time. The chamber's security systems, supposedly the most sophisticated in kingdom space, made no attempt to block the transmission. Of course they didn't. Humans had helped upgrade them just last cycle. Your first mistake, Chen continued, pacing through holographic trade routes that sprang to life around her, was assuming our technological limitations were real. Those clumsy diplomatic protocols. Calculated. Those inferior ships, carefully disguised. Every concession we made was part of a strategy decades in the making. The display shifted to show human diplomatic missions over the years. The Council watched in growing horror as apparent blunders and mistakes revealed themselves as precise maneuvers, each one positioning humans exactly where they needed to be. Remember when we accidentally violated quarantine protocols in the Nexus sector? Chen smiled. That mistake let us map your entire emergency response system. Or when our trade ships kept having drive failures near your defense platforms. Each breakdown perfectly positioned to scan your military capabilities. HFY's scales went pale. But the technology gap, your ships were so primitive. Were they? The hologram expanded, showing the true nature of human vessels, the stealth systems hidden beneath crude exteriors, the advanced sensors disguised as primitive scanners. We showed you exactly what you expected to see. Your arrogance did the rest. Around the chamber, council members were receiving private messages on their secure devices. Each message contained proof of how humans had manipulated their house's specific interests over the years. Trade deals that seemed to favor the kingdom had actually given humans access to crucial infrastructure. Technical assistance that appeared primitive had introduced subtle vulnerabilities. The industrial colony rights you forced us to accept. Chen gestured, and a new map appeared, each one positioned to monitor your fleet movements. Those unfair trade terms, they let us insert our agents into every level of your society. Even your victories over us were calculated. Every concession gave us exactly what we needed. A younger noble, scales flashing defiance, stood up. But our biological scans were calibrated using baseline data we provided. Chen finished. Did you never wonder why humans were so eager to share our medical records? Every limitation you discovered about our biology was carefully crafted to hide our true capabilities. The display shifted again, showing years of human diplomatic missions, each seemingly random assignment, each routine trading post, each cultural exchange, all part of an intricate web of surveillance and infiltration. Your entire understanding of humanity was based on what we wanted you to see. Chen's hologram walked through the council chamber, passing through stunned nobles. You thought you were dealing with a primitive species struggling to compete. In reality, you were watching a masterclass in strategic deception. HFY, his authority crumbling with each revelation, managed one question. Why? Why maintain such an elaborate deception? Because, Chancellor, Chen's smile turned predatory. We needed to know exactly how your society would respond to a perceived inferior suddenly revealing their true strength. And you've performed exactly as our psychological models predicted. Even now, You're all wondering which of your trusted advisors might be human agents, aren't you? The chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. They hadn't just failed to understand humanity's technological capabilities. They'd completely misread their capacity for long-term strategic planning. Every interaction, every trade deal, every diplomatic exchange had been another strand in a web they hadn't even known was being woven. And now, too late, they were seeing the spider at its center. The kingdom's grand throne room, with its crystalline spires and quantum-locked gravity wells, had never felt so small. Every noble house representative present watched as Admiral Marcus Steele's hologram materialized before them, not in the designated diplomatic projection area, but directly upon the ancient throne itself. A deliberate insult and a display of technological superiority that made the kingdom's best security measures look primitive. "Let's discuss terms," Steele said, his weathered face bearing no trace of triumph or malice, just cold efficiency. Behind him, tactical displays showed human warships maintaining their perfect firing positions around every major noble house world. High Chancellor Xvax, chosen to speak after 3 hours of panicked deliberation, stepped forward. "The kingdom has survived for 10,000 cycles. We do not bow to." "Interesting choice of spokesperson," Steele interrupted, gesturing. A new hologram appeared, Xvax accepting bribes from 6 different houses over the past cycle. Perhaps House Catheri's representative would be more credible. "No." Another gesture, another damning recording. "House Ferran then." "Oh wait." One by one, Steele exposed the secret crimes of every potential negotiator. The humans hadn't just gathered evidence, they'd cataloged enough dirt to destroy any noble who dared take charge of the situation. Now, Steele continued, "Let's try this again. We want 3 things. First, everyone involved in Ambassador Reynolds' death. Everyone. The ones who planned it, the ones who executed it, and the ones who covered it up." Prince Vithran, watching from his secured chambers, felt his scales go death-white as his private computer displayed a comprehensive list of his conspirators. They'd known everything. Second, Steele's hologram walked down the throne steps, passing through stunned nobles. "Structural reforms. Your entire society is built on hereditary power and mutual blackmail. That ends now. We're installing oversight committees on every noble world. And yes, we've already identified enough of your own people who'll support this to make it stick." The nobles watched in horror as their secure channels lit up with messages from their own vassals, declaring support for human-backed reforms. The humans hadn't just infiltrated their houses, they'd built a support network for the aftermath. Finally, Steele's voice turned even colder. "Reparations. Not to Earth. To every species your noble houses have exploited over the centuries. We have proof of all of it, and we've already shared it with your victims. Consider it motivation to accept our oversight." A young noble, scales flashing with desperate bravado, spoke up. "And if we refuse?" Steele didn't even turn to look at him. Instead, every noble's private computer displayed a personalized message, detailing exactly what they would lose if they rejected the terms. Family secrets, hidden assets. Some even received DNA test results proving their bloodlines weren't as pure as claimed. "You won't refuse," Steele said simply, "because we're not just threatening your lives or your power. We're threatening your legacy. Everything your houses have built, every secret you've kept, every lie you've maintained. We can unravel it all. Your own people will tear you apart when they learn the truth." To demonstrate, key pieces of evidence began leaking on noble house networks. Just enough to start whispers, to make vassals question their lords, to make every noble realize that resistance meant complete destruction of everything they'd built. "You have 1 hour. Steele's hologram began to fade. "Oh, and don't bother trying to evacuate to your secret bunkers. We've had control of their life support systems for years." Interesting reading material in some of those bunkers, by the way. Amazing what nobles will store when they think no one's watching. As the hologram vanished, The nobles faced a terrible choice: accept human oversight and survive with reduced power, or resist and watch generations of carefully maintained authority crumble to dust. In the ensuing silence, Admiral Javeri's voice came through their secure channel, heavy with resignation. "We should have remembered. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that patiently studies its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." The humans had given them a choice, but they'd spent years ensuring it wasn't really a choice at all. One cycle after Ambassador Reynolds' death, the Crystal Palace bore witness to a ceremony unlike any in kingdom history. Representatives from every noble house stood in carefully arranged rows, their scales dulled to submissive shades as Admiral Marcus Steele, in person this time, took the podium. Behind him, the ancient throne had been replaced with a simple quantum-forged chair, a statement even the densest noble couldn't miss. The old order was gone. "The reforms have exceeded expectations," Steele began, his voice carrying naturally through the chamber's perfect acoustics. 98% of noble houses have complied fully with oversight requirements. The remaining 2%. He paused, allowing a slight smile. "Well, their former vassals send their regards from their newly independent worlds." Prince Vithran, now stripped of his titles and wearing prisoner's restraints, stood in the front row. His scales, once proudly iridescent, had faded to the gray of complete submission. Beside him, other conspirators in Reynolds' death waited for their sentences. "Justice," Steele continued, "comes in many forms. For some, his gaze swept over Vithran and his co-conspirators. It means facing the consequences of their direct actions. For others, it means adapting to a new reality they never saw coming. Holoprojectors activated, showing changes across kingdom space. Trade routes flourished under new oversight. Former vassal species took seats on planetary councils. The kingdom's rigid hierarchy was transforming into something more equitable, guided by human advisors who had spent years learning exactly how to reshape this society. "Some of you still wonder why we waited so long to reveal ourselves." Steele addressed the unspoken question. "Why spend decades infiltrating your society when we could have demonstrated our strength immediately?" The display shifted to show the kingdom's new defense fleet, a mix of human and kingdom designs, crewed by joint species teams. Because true change requires understanding, we needed to know every layer of your society, every pressure point, every potential ally and enemy. Creating lasting peace means more than just winning a war. From her position among the Earth diplomatic corps, Ambassador Catherine Reynolds, very much alive thanks to carefully designed antibodies and a temporary death-mimicking compound, watched her supposed murderers. The price for their arrogance would be witnessing everything they valued transform into something they barely recognized. "Your society runs on secrets," Steele continued. "We didn't just gather them. We learned how to use them surgically. Every revelation, every reform, every change has been calculated to cause minimum damage to your civilian population while ensuring maximum compliance from those in power." The nobles shifted uncomfortably as their secure channels hummed with new notifications. More evidence, more secrets, more leverage. The humans weren't just enforcing peace, they were maintaining it through the constant, subtle reminder that they still held all the cards. "But there is mercy in justice." Steele's tone softened slightly. "Those who embrace these changes, who genuinely work to reform their houses and support the new order, will find humanity to be generous allies. Already, joint human kingdom research projects are producing innovations that benefit both our species." The display showed new medical facilities, education centers, and trading posts. The humans hadn't just conquered the kingdom, they'd prepared to improve it. "Let this be the lesson," Steele concluded, gesturing to Vithran. "Not that humanity is stronger than you thought, but that true strength lies in patience, observation, and the wisdom to know when to reveal one's true nature." As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Javeri, now serving on the Joint Species Council, reflected on how completely they'd misunderstood humanity. They weren't just technologically superior. They were masters of the long game, capable of maintaining deception for decades while methodically positioning themselves for total victory. The kingdom had thought itself the spider, slowly drawing primitive humans into its web of politics and power. Instead, they'd been the flies all along, watched by patient predators who understood that the perfect strike requires perfect preparation. And as the reformed kingdom took its first steps into a new era, one truth became clear. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, their ships, or even their infiltrators. It was their patience.